I'll introduce us. Okay, today is September the 16th, 2004. My name is Charla Henson. I'm with Wayne Colony at the 12th Armored Division Reunion here in Abilene, Texas. Thank you for letting us talk to you today. First of all, we would like to talk about who your parents were, your family of origin, and tell us something about where you came from.
Certainly. I was born in Bradenton, Florida, on a grove, with no electricity, no indoor plumbing, until I was about 6 or 7. I was raised by Aunt Amy and Uncle Frank, black mammy, and just as close to me as my own parents, both of whom had been born into slavery. I was born in 1925. They were born somewhere in the late 1850s. So in 1930, which is when I really begin remembering things, they were in their early 70s, which is hard to believe. Takes it so far back so rapidly. My father had enlisted in the Navy as an apprentice seaman in 1914. He retired in 1950 as a rear admiral. He got out of the Navy in 1918, attended the Colorado School of Mines, rejoined the Naval Reserve in the early 30s, and when World War II came along, then he was returned to active duty, and he continued first in the Reserve and then regular Navy until his retirement in 1950.
What was his name and your mother's name?
My father's name was Herndon, Herndon, P. Coloney, Coloney. My mother's name was Mary Adore, Adore, Kramer, Cramer, Colony. Both my mother and father were born in Denver, Colorado. My father's father, moved to Bradenton, Florida in the late 1800s, and from Denver, and owned the first citrus packing plant in Manatee County. They had the family groves, and as I said before, I was born in a house on one of the groves.
Did you have brothers and sisters in your family?
I had one brother, now dead.
Okay, tell me about what brought you into the 12th Armored Division.
Very good. In 1941, my father was stationed at the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, Texas. When I graduated from Flower Bluff High School, one of a total senior class of 12, I endeavored to enlist in the Navy. My father was then a commander, and of course I had lots of support, but the Navy wouldn't have me because my eyes were too bad.
Oh.
So after having tried for a considerable period of time, while I was still trying to get into the Navy, the Army drafted me, and they happily made me later a tank driver. They didn't care about how bad my eyes were.
Where did you go into service?
I went to basic training at Camp Fannin near Tyler, Texas. Then apparently my entrance scores were good enough. I was sent to Texas A&M as under the Army Specialized Training Program. When that closed down, I went from ASTM and Texas A&M to Camp Barkley and Company C of the 714th Tank Battalion, 12th Armored Division.
Tell me about when you found out that you were going to be leaving A&M and kind of the feelings of closing that program down. And
I was perfectly happy. I was delighted to move on along. Texas A&M was fine, but it was not something that I was totally devoted to.
Okay. Tell me about the first day at Camp Barkley. Your remembrances, the things you see, all those things.
Well, Camp Barkley looked not too much different from Camp Fannin. A little bit different from College Station, Texas. A number of the individuals that had been at Texas A&M also were sent to Camp Barkley. So I was comfortable and at home, and of course, basically having grown up in the military, went to 11 different schools in 12 years. Military life was just very comfortable, very natural, very normal. So I didn't have any of the, I guess you might say, entry shock or culture shock that people who had not spent their early lives with the military might have.
Tell me about the living conditions. What that was set up. Who was with you?
Of course, we had the typical barracks. It was hot. The tanks were hot, but it was interesting. It was fascinating. It was just a great experience.
Who was your captain?
Later on, Captain Clayton was with us in Europe. Early on, I don't really remember who was our captain, who was the company commander at Camp Barkley.
Okay. Tell me about some of the training that you experienced, and did you begin as a tanker, or you were a driver?
At one time or another, I was an assistant driver or bow gunner, a driver, a loader, and a tank commander. I was never a gunner.
Okay. Was that a situation where you kind of had to learn all the jobs within that tank, or?
To a degree, yes. While at Camp Barkley, I was a bow gunner or assistant driver, a driver, and then a loader. And when we went to Europe, my position in the tank was as a loader.
Describe the inside of a tank to us, about physically what it was like.
Physically, very, very tight, very confining. In the summer, extraordinarily hot, and in the winter, extraordinarily cold. But I was always thankful I was in a tank instead of out there with the infantry.
Tell me about that. Can you talk to me a little more about that?
I was appreciative of the fact that we rode and didn't march. I was appreciative of the fact that we had something between us and enemy gunfire. I was appreciative of the fact that we could carry with us supplies and so on that you couldn't, that you simply couldn't carry in the infantry. So I just liked the tanks, really.
Okay. Look in your mind at the inside of the tank and describe that to me.
Well, speaking as a loader, I'm sitting in this seat as I am now. Immediately to my left is the sponsor wall of the turret. Immediately up and to my left is the pistol port. Immediately to my right is the breech of the gun. Immediately below me are hatches which make the ammunition accessible. The rounds are stored vertically below me under the hatch. with the projectile end up. When loading the gun, you use what is similar to a, quote, Chinese handcuff or finger cuff. It's a mesh sleeve that can slip down over the projectile. Then when you lift up, the mesh tightens. You lift the round up. Would turn to my right facing the tank commander, who is on the other side of the breech. The gunner is forward of the tank commander to my left. I would reach down between my legs, secure a round, lift it up, lay it on my lap, put the instrument that I picked it up with down to my side, pick the gun up, pick the round up, place it in the breech, and with my fingers tightly closed, run the round in, and as it goes into the breech, then the breech block would come forward very rapidly and kick my hand out. And you didn't want to have your fingers out because they might be left behind. Then you would swing back so that your shoulder was well out of range. When the gun fired, a recoil would take it back just about past my shoulder here. Then it would run forward. The breech would now be open again, and you'd repeat it. My hearing went then. Nobody ever heard of ear muffs or hearing protectors. What would you want those things for? But it did play the dickens with my hearing.
How many rounds could you carry at one time if you were fully loaded?
This is approximation. It seems to me that we had somewhere between 75 and 100 rounds divided between armor piercing and high explosive. We had additional ammunition storage immediately behind in horizontal racks, but our primary access to ammunition was in the floor. I really don't remember exactly how many, but as I said, between 75 and 100 rounds, it seems to me.
What kind of tank did you
Went over in the M4A3, which was equipped with short barrel 75 millimeter gun. Then as those tanks were knocked out, as we lost those, they were replaced with the M4A4s, both Shermans, that were equipped with a 76 millimeter gun, which had a much longer tube and had a muzzle brake, as opposed to the 75 millimeter gun, which was short tube and had no muzzle brake. Theoretically, we had much higher muzzle velocity, but in actuality, we really couldn't see much difference between the 75 and the 76 as far as any effect that it might have on German armor.
I'm going to kind of skip ahead a little
Okay.
bit, and then we're going to come back. Tell me the first time that you ever came into contact with a German tank, what kind it was. Were you surprised?
We had moved forward into the early hours of the morning. We stopped, I guess maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. And as it began to get light, looked out of our periscope, and there oh, maybe 200, 300 yards away was a Royal Tiger tank facing us. And at that time, I was a tank commander. I kicked the gunner on the shoulder. We all looked forward. We put 3 armor-piercing rounds dead center into the tank as rapidly as we could fire, and watched all 3 of them bounce off, literally. And we thought, man, we are in deep trouble now. We had cranked up while we were firing, and we started backing up. And fortunately, or apparently, the Tiger tank must have been out of ammunition because it never fired, and it cranked up and backed up. And really and truly, that's the closest we ever came after watching the effect of our 76 millimeter rounds on the Tiger tank. We came to the conclusion that we did not want to get anywhere close to them. So anytime that it appeared that the company as a whole was getting close, why, we called for artillery support and endeavored to avoid any direct confrontation with armor.
Where was the location of that first instance?
That was moving down, that was in Alsace-Lorraine. That was moving down, it was just a short while before Herlesheim.
Let's go back a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about the jumping off place, New York, what it was like to travel across the ocean, your impressions.
Well, of course we went to Camp Shanks from Barclay by train. I got 2 leaves in New York City before we went across, and had a wonderful time in New York City. I believe we went over to England on the SS Marine Raven. We went over on either the Marine Raven or the Marine Devil, and we came back on the other, and I'm not sure which one we went over on. We were bivouacked in Tidworth Barracks on Salisbury Plain, and while there, I got several leaves to London, and one evening in London, when bombs really started coming in, I found myself in front of the Claridge of Claridges, went in, and they were so absolutely wonderful to me that I determined then that Claridge was the hotel for me, and in subsequent years I was fortunate enough to do a lot of work in England and Europe, and we always stayed at Claridge's, and well, that was home in London in later years.
Was the Tidworth Barracks, was that experience, was it a bad experience, or what was that like?
I guess I'm somewhat peculiar. It was a fine experience.
Well, when did you get your tanks? When did you get the equipment?
We were issued tanks late October or early November of '44, and we boarded landing ship tank going across the channel on the 11th of November '44, and crossing the channel was a wonderful experience. My very close friend Cliff Oberg, who is now dead, and I were the scavengers for our tank, and we found access to the marine stores for the landing ship tank, and we loaded our tank with number 10 cans of fruit cocktail at, you name it. We had every conceivable portion of that tank stuffed with canned food, which lasted us for a considerable period of time. We were just really well equipped. We landed a little town called Auffay, A-U-F-A-Y, France. And at one point while there, I liberated a nice brass fire helmet from the fire chief of Auffay, which I still have.
Tell me about, you land in France, you're there for a few days?
I guess 3 or 4 days, a short time. Then we started moving forward, and let's see, 11 November, and then I guess very early December was the first action that we were in, and early December, my tank was hit with a high explosive shell which hit the top of the turret and just wiped all of the hatches off. But all of us got out of the tank. None of us could hear anything for a considerable period of time, but we just took a direct hit. Later, it was speculated that we were hit with a 280 millimeter round from a railroad gun that had been firing at us. That was an M4A3 with a short-barreled gun, and it was replaced with the A4 with the long-barrel 76, and it was after that we encountered the Tiger tank that I mentioned.
What is it like to get hit in a tank?
Well, we were extremely fortunate because it was a high explosive shell, and it was just an enormous burst of sound, indescribable, and light, fire. The tank did not catch on fire, but it was as if we were in the center of a tremendous ball of fire. And as I said, we all got out and just ran like hell to get away from the tank, because we figured if one round came in, the next one was going to come very close to it. Fortunately, I was never in another tank that was hit. If you got a hull penetration, if the shell actually came into the tank, punched a hole in the armor, that was pretty much it. Mostly nobody ever really got out. That was when a round came through the wall of a tank, and the metal on the inside would spall off and start bouncing around the interior, and it just chewed everything up. My close friend of mine, Sergeant White, early on, was just, nothing was going on. We were bivouacked, a hatch was open, and a mortar round came right through the hatch, just once, and it of course killed everybody in the tank, but it was a real mess.
How did you, or the people that you, well, let's ask about you. How did you learn to deal with that? You know, how did you survive that mentally, emotionally?
I guess I'm just too dumb to have had any neuroses about it whatsoever. I was don't misunderstand me. Certainly I was scared from time to time, but I'm fortunate to have a very cheerful disposition, and I was never able to understand post-traumatic stress syndrome, because I saw my good friends splattered all over the inside of a tank, and I could, at Herlesheim, I could look out of my periscope and see other tanks hit, and but as I say, I was just fortunate that it did not affect me adversely.
Talk to me about the days before Herlesheim, what the information that you had received, and then the experience of Herlesheim.
I guess you would say it was the most vivid memory about receiving information was that we never received any. Oh, down in the Colmar pocket, we were working with a French unit, and vividly remember the entire interchange between us and the French on a repeated basis was them saying, "Répondez, s'il vous plaît, répondez, répondez." Nobody knowing who the hell we were talking to, or where we were, or what was going on.
So were you not aware that y'all had been moved to the French army?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But
well, we knew that, etc. But what I mean is, from moment to moment, you always wondered where you were going, what was going on. Radio communication was not of the best, and fortunately you had another tank out there that you could follow.
So did you go to Colmar before Herlesheim?
The Colmar pocket and Herlesheim is there in the pocket.
Were you at Herlesheim?
Yes.
In that action?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that.
I remember it being black night. Tremendous barrage, artillery coming in on us. I remember at one point getting out of my tank and going to the command post with Captain Clayton, I think, was there, and Lieutenant Colonel, whose name I don't know, to get orders for our next move. Mainly confusion. Firing and firing and firing.
Did y'all go out onto the plane and then have to go back?
Yes. After the war, I went to Herlesheim. I visited Herlesheim and actually found where my tank had been located. I even found where the command post was when I went back to get orders. But even then, everything was very, very vague. That's not a lot of help.
Well, it sounds like chaos.
It was total chaos is the best description.
How many tanks did the 714th lose or survive during that time? Do you remember?
Lord, I don't remember. I have a vague recollection of some 17 tanks out of the 714th, but that's just vague. And if somebody told me that it was 7 instead of 17, I certainly wouldn't argue with them.
Tell me about the general feeling, morale after Herlesheim. among you?
We had come through a really difficult time, and the general feeling was, damn, we were lucky.
So did they give you a time of rest, or was it straight on through? And did you get replacements? And
we were constantly getting replacements, or at least it seemed that we were. I remember one of the most vivid memories is how cold it was. Being in the tank for extended periods of time, and your breath would condense on the inside of the tank and freeze, and there'd be a quarter to a half inch of ice over all of the outer. Everybody was healthy, and then I remember that we went to we had a rest camp for about a week, where we went back and we mixed with and everybody came down with the flu and colds. As long as we were in the tank where it was cold as hell, everybody was healthy. But as soon as we got out mixing with others, why, everybody came down with something or other.
were you ever, you were active duty the whole time? You were never wounded?
No, I was never wounded. Very fortunate.
Tell me about, after Herleshheim, now I want to ask you, how did y'all feel about replacements? That relationship, how that went, how you worked it out?
It was fine. I have to. I went in the Army when I was 18. I was 19 in Europe. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink. I would always trade my cigarette rations for candy. Clark bars were my absolute favorite. Tootsie Rolls were good. And you asked about replacements, but funny thing, I'm busy chewing a Tootsie Roll, and one of the men came in, looked at me as a battle-hardened veteran chewing tobacco. And apparently was impressed with the fact that here I was chewing. Actually, I was eating a Tootsie Roll. But we got along fine.
Did it take very long for the camaraderie to kind of gel, or was it just there was a time you just got in and did your job?
You just got in and did your job, right? Mm-hmm.
How was that for you, being a non-drinker? You're the first 12th Armored person I ever found that didn't drink. Was that were you the designated driver?
Sometimes they thought that I was a little bit peculiar. Mm-hmm. But that didn't bother me.
If you were to think about, if you were to think of one thing that stands out in your mind in all your experiences, Herleshheim, going over whatever, what would that be? If you were to close your eyes and think, this is the first thing that comes to my mind.
Probably being the tank being hit with a high explosive shell. That stood out. Totally inconsequential. Friend of mine in another tank loved to shoot his grease gun, and he would accumulate all of the magazines, and as we were going down the road, he would be up there and he'd shoot at telephone poles and trees, and just loved to shoot his Tommy gun. Another time I remember we had one of the members of the C Company was nicknamed Injun. Now, you were always scavenging for food. Whenever we would stop, Injun would get out of the tank, run to the nearest house or what have you, and say, "Haben Sie Eier? Have you any eggs?" And if they said no, he never shot anybody, but he would run off a few rounds into the ground, and they would generally run and get him some eggs. That's probably close to looting, isn't it?
So your stores didn't last forever, the ones that you got out?
No, they didn't last forever by any means. They lasted for a good long time, but they didn't last forever.
What was your reception that you received by the local people?
It was pretty good, very good, as a fact. You asked for outstanding memories. We bivouacked with families time after time. I remember one village with great, huge manure piles, sleeping upstairs. They had cows on the lower floor, sleeping upstairs and under a feather comfort. And I remember them fixing eggs for us for breakfast. This was in southern France, and they were just very, very good to us.
What was your relationship with the foot soldiers? Did you ever come into a relationship with them?
Good, but we had not a great deal of contact with them, with the infantry, or at least I didn't, or my tank crew didn't.
So they did never get a ride or anything with you?
Oh yes, oh yeah. They were moving forward. We would always have them, but that was we would be in the tank. They would be riding, but there was little opportunity for any interchange or anything like that.
Let's go past Herlesheim and let's go on and then into the Colmar pocket and tell me those things that you remember of those times.
Well, after Herlesheim, I remember a number of small engagements, but nothing really outstanding until we moved north and were attached to Patton's 3rd. And then the drive to the Rhine is most vivid. I remember at that time, you'd come up over a rise and you'd see the retreating Germans ahead of us, and they were using horse-drawn vehicles. They were essentially out of fuel to a very large extent. One of my most vivid memories is as we were moving forward, apparently terribly wounded German soldier was lying in the middle of the road, and he was waving his hand like that to show that he was still alive, and all of the tanks in our column passed over him, with the tracks on either side, and I remember thinking what a terrifying situation that must have been. But all of the tanks were very careful to straddle him as we went forward.
Talk to me about getting to the Rhine, and did you ever see Patton? And
Never saw Patton at all. Vividly remember that the signs that were posted that there was a fine for not wearing a tie. It was very spit and polish. None of us had ever worn a tie or ever conceived of wearing a tie, but apparently that was de rigueur for at least some elements of Patton's Third Army. We being from Patches, we were not nearly as trim, spick and span, apparently.
Were you aware that y'all were the mystery division?
No, I didn't find that out until after we got back, and my mother showed me newspapers.
Tell me about the end of the war. How did you find out about it? Was it one day, or did it kind of just go on and on and on and on?
No, it was May 8th, very vividly. We were, the last few days of the war, we all were aware that things were winding down and expected it. We had a great deal of celebration, and those few days after May 8th, we were bivouacked in a nice, beautiful little town whose name I don't remember. And I took photographs, individual photographs of everybody in my company that I could get hold of. I still have. I guess I got close to 100 pictures, all identified and so on. I remember having leave, and Cliff Oberg and I and another man named Holman got to Oberammergau and up to Schneeferner House at the top, and then years later my wife and I were there and went over the same places, and up, and it was amazing how little Schneeferner House had changed.
What did at the end of the war, what was, question, did the 714th, did they liberate any of the concentration camps?
Yes, another company from 714th, not C Company, another company did.
Do you have any recollections about, did y'all ever talk to them about that, or?
I remember seeing it, Landsberg, after. Really awful. Really awful. And it's my understanding, although I never actually confirmed it, that members of the 714th encountered and assisted in the liberation of Werner von Braun and a group of German scientists, all about at the same time.
Tell me about the end of the war, and then what happened to you, what you did.
Oh, okay. I had enough points to get out, but I was declared essential and was sent to Camp Swift outside of Austin, Texas.
What made you essential?
Damned if I know. I don't think it was any particular expertise that I had. I think that's just the way things happened to be drawn. But anyway, I, together with a few others, were attached to an anti-tank battalion to presumably train them in anti-tank warfare. What anti-tank weapons could do as far as tanks were concerned. And I was there at Camp Swift until the war ended, and then I was discharged in February of 46.
Tell me about your story after the war. What have you done? What was your career? Did you marry before or after the war?
Oh, of course I had some time at Texas A&M, transferable credits, but after I got out in February, I decided that I'd forgotten everything I might have learned at Texas A&M. I went to Georgia Tech, graduated in 1950, married Ann, who's with me today, on June 21st of 1950. We've been married 54 years. My father was a close friend of Millard Caldwell, who was elected governor of Florida. And Millard Caldwell asked him to take a leave of absence from the Navy and come to Tallahassee as chief highway engineer of the State Road Department. My father was a civil engineer in the Civil Engineering Corps, Seabees, in the Navy. So my family had moved to Tallahassee, so I moved to Tallahassee at that time. My wife was born in Tallahassee, and as I say, I spent from 46 to 50 in going to school at Georgia Tech, commuting back and forth. 2 summers I worked in Venezuela, doing as a heavy equipment operator, building access roads to the Tamanaca oil fields. Graduated from Georgia Tech. Incidentally, I had a 4-year 4.0 grade point average, and graduated summa cum laude. Went to work with the State Road Department. Then in 1954, I had an opportunity to go to work with Gibbs and Hill, an engineering firm from New York City. And my wife and I went to Guatemala, and I designed all of the drainage structures for the Pan American Highway through Guatemala and Honduras, El Salvador, and for the Trans-Isthmus Highway across Guatemala. We were there for a couple of years. I came back to Tallahassee and immediately was asked to go to the New York office of Gibbs and Hill, which was a fantastic experience. I didn't want to leave Tallahassee, so Gibbs and Hill was so kind as to say, okay, we'll come on to New York for a few weeks, and we will fly you home every weekend. Well, a few weeks turned into a year and a half, and for a year and a half, I spent the week in Manhattan and flew home to Tallahassee on the weekend, which is just about as great a life as you can possibly have. After that episode, why the Gibbs and Hill opened an office in Tampa, Florida, and I was chief engineer of the office in Tampa. I left Gibbs and Hill and joined another engineering firm, J.E. Greiner Company, and worked on what is now the Tampa International Airport. And I was project manager for the downrange missile tracking stations across the Atlantic for NASA. Left Gibbs and Hill in 1963 and became a partner in an architectural engineering firm, Barrett Daffin and Coloney. In 1970, I left Barrett Daffin and Coloney, opened my own firm, Wayne H. Coloney Company, pure engineering. That transitioned into mechanical design, and then ultimately into manufacturing. And Wayne H. Coloney Company moved from being an engineering firm to a design and manufacturing firm. At our peak, we had about 350 employees, and we're doing about $25 million a year. We specialized in the design and manufacture of high-speed ammunition handling and transfer systems for medium-caliber rapid-fire guns. To put that in perspective, guns firing rounds from 20 millimeter to 40 millimeter at rates from 1,000 to 6,000 rounds a minute. And the ammunition handling systems that Wayne H. Coloney Company designed are still in use by the Air Force and the Navy. And recently I was at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, and the commanding general told me that the Colony systems will be in the inventory until the year 2020. And in 1985, I sold Wayne H. Coloney Company to Howden Group, P.L.C. of Glasgow, Scotland, with the approval of the State Department, and retired, and then decided that that was no fun, so I reopened an engineering firm, Colony Company, and I'm still doing it.
And what do you engineer now?
It's now Colony Bell Engineering. I sold that company to a John Bell in 1996 and continued as a, I guess you might say, a consultant. And I am now semi-retired. I only go to the office 4 days a week. I don't go in on Fridays. And we do litigation support, investigation of primarily for major insurance companies across the United States. And to put that in perspective, when there is a major claim, the insurance companies want to know if, one, is it real? Two, was there some element that caused it? And if so, is there somebody we can sue to get our money back? Again, putting that in perspective, some 6 or 8 years ago, an Amtrak train derailed in a bayou near Mobile, Alabama, killing 46 people. I was the engineer who assisted a consortium of 14 attorneys suing Amtrak and the barge company that had dislocated the bridge for a total of $500 million, not million, $500 million. And I was the engineering expert who appeared in each of the various actions that was involved there. But that's what we do now.
Yeah. If you were to say one thing in 50 years, if somebody were to listen to this tape, what would you tell them that you learned from your World War II experience and the things that you would like them to remember?
All right, from the World War II experience, hang in there, have perseverance, determination, and recognize that if you don't give up, things are going to get better.
Great. Thank you very much.